Hey, how's everyone doing? I'll be with you shortly. Thank you for being here, whether it's your evening or your morning, as it is here in Asia. And I'll be with you guys shortly. Appreciate you being here, Tyler, Minix, Truth Monster, Jay, James Richter, Seymour Rivers. I'll be with you guys in just a bit. And yeah, if you could just please let me know how the audio is coming in, if it's loud enough for you guys. All right, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, and I do thank you for being here, whether it's again during the nighttime for you or if it's in the morning for you here in, as it is here in Asia. Thank you all for being here. A quick roll call. Let's see. Tyler Minix, again, first time I've seen your name here. Welcome aboard. As always, if you are new or if it's your first time here, just go ahead and type in new and where you're from, and we'll see if we can go ahead and acknowledge you. Again, Truth Monster, J. James Richter. Howdy. How you doing, James Richter? Seymour Rivers. Love, but nothing will happen, just more hype, I guess. Perhaps that might be in referral to Basel 3, which we will talk about because some people think it's going to do something, some people think it's not going to do much. So we'll take a look again. So let's see, Black Red Silver Bug. First time I've seen you here as well. American Rebel, how you doing? Thank you. Let's see, Jason Lind. Interesting comment from Australia. I think nothing will change this quarter except premiums. Okay, that's a good comment because premiums, they haven't really come down, and again that's still the same because silver is still a bit there's still delays in trying to get silver. It's still a bit tight, so it's premiums. They are going to. It looks like they may kind of stay the same, but I can guarantee you, if dealers can, they will bring that premium down. It's a competitive market, so it does pay to bring that premium down, um, to your benefit. To your benefit, Tweety Bird, how you doing? Pablo Pina, how you doing, my friend? Peter Schultz, Jack P, how you doing again? Let's see, Thailand me first. Saudi, okay, Thailand, okay. Um, Harold B. Carriel and Wilder, good morning or good evening. How you doing? Hugs all around. Hugs all around for sure. Chris Primer, Cosmo, David Vilches, Los Angeles. Welcome aboard. Hope things are okay in LA. Definitely hope things are okay for you in LA. Inspector Jason, again, same from LA. Maybe you two guys can exchange coins, buy some silver coins from each other. See what's going on there in LA. Manuel De Jesus, how you doing? Greg Wilgis, South Carolina, how you doing, Greg? Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Sylvia Burns, New Jersey. Camille Kosowski, sorry about that. New from Australia. Let's see. Okay, A Roll, new from Maine. A lot of new guys. Appreciate you guys coming on board. Let's see. Peter Schultz, everyone on the bus. Yes, exactly. And Basel 3, it's a topic that seems to be on a lot of people's minds, and we'll go ahead and give it a go. And as always, just take a seat, sit down, buckle up, keep your heads and arms in the window, and I'll try my best to explain it all. JR, Anna, Krislinski, how you doing? Uh, Seychelles. Okay. Seychelles, that's a new one. First time we've had a person from Seychelles. Okay, so a lot of new guys here. A lot of new guys here. Jay Hike, Jack Parher Jr., South Carolina, Colorado. Okay, so all right, a lot of new guys, and yes, please, by all means, like button. That means a lot to us. That means a lot more than you would know, or than anyone expects. Let's see, Patrick Bateman. Okay, so a lot of new guys and a lot of stalwarts. We appreciate you all being here. So, having said that, please do subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of new updates, and give us a thumbs up. Again, those thumbs ups really do mean a lot. And as always, you can find us on social media. Silverbullion.com.sg is our website. And we do sell gold and silver. Yes, we are a gold and silver bullion dealer. We do store and vault silver and gold, precious metals, other things like nickel. And more importantly, we do specialize in wealth protection, systemic wealth protection. As I say, week in and week out, you guys, pretty much all of you folks out there know what's going on. And you know that number one, you're going to have to protect yourself. And number two, that means you're going to need options. And if you do need options, and if you'd like to know what we can do for you, because we actually can do quite a bit of things, go ahead and email us at sales@silverbullion.com.sg. Silver Bullion SG is our Facebook handle. Silver Bullion PL is where you can find us on Twitter, PL for private limited. Silver Bullion SG is our Instagram account. And if you would like just the audio versions, you can find us on bit.ly, SBTV iTunes, and SBTV Spotify. And if you have Telegram, whether on your phone or your desktop, search Crisis Tracker. And that's where we have a little group where we do, it's actually a growing group. Thank you for that. And it's where we post things pretty much daily as it pertains to finance, economics, gold, silver, things like that. So it's a good group to kind of stay abreast, keep in touch with what's going on, without too much fluff, without too many posts that will bombard your phone or your desktop. So I do hope we do see you in that group there, Crisis Tracker. So again, thank you all for being here. And having said that, we will move over to our upcoming guest. We've had him on once before a while back. Uh, Pretty smart guy, JP Cortez. He knows what's going on. He's the policy director for the Sound Money Defense League, a nonpartisan national public policy organization working to restore sound money on the state and federal level. With a background in Austrian economics, Cortez crafts policy, testifies at legislative hearings, and is a regular invited to speak at events on sound money, constitutional issues, monetary policy, and state policy. JP Cortez, you definitely want to sign up so you can be notified when his interview is up. And I do believe my colleague Stephen T will be doing the interview. So hopefully you can support Stephen T as well. I really, really do appreciate that. I think Stephen's doing a pretty good job. He's doing a great job. So having said all that, we will move over to our ebook. Thank you. And we had some pretty good responses. So what we'll do is we will offer that same book as we did from last week. But no worries. If you do win it again, just let us know. And we'll go ahead and give out an alternative book. Name of the book is American Default, written by Sebastian Edwards. American economy is strong in large part because nobody believes that America would ever default on its debt. Yet in 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt did just that. When in a bid to pull the country out of a depression, he depreciated the US dollar in relation to gold, effectively annulling all debt contracts. American Default is the story of this forgotten chapter in America's history. Interesting book there. House rules. If you would like to win that book, first thing you got to do is download that Kindle app from your app or your tablets, your phone or your tablets App Store. It's a free app, so go ahead and download that app and be one of the first or the top 5 to answer this coming question correctly. The question is going to come from the Rob Kientz interview that we just posted up late last week. Answer it before the timer runs out. You're going to have about a minute and 30. U.S. winners will be given a link to download the ebook. Non-U.S. winners, if you win, you can ask Amazon to exchange the ebook for other things like gift cards, and that's again because Amazon or Kindle they don't allow gifting of ebooks outside the U.S. So you can arrange for something else with them, and you're going to have to provide us an email during this live stream, and no other messages. Excuse me, no other messages in that email besides your email. So that way we can hide your comment, we can mute your comment, and nobody else, excuse me, will see it except for us. So having said all of that, uh, Patrick Bateman, huh? Paul Krugman. I don't know about that. He's in his own world there. But having said all that, let's get to the question. And again, this comes from the Rob Kientz interview, which we had last week. Rob, he's one of the good guys. I think one day I'm going to compile a list where I'm going to let you folks decide who's the good guys. I'm not going to say bad guys, but we'll have a list of who the good guys are. Anyway, let's get to that question. Question for the ebook. The Fed has become a blank organization. And this comes from the interview from Rob Kientz last week. Okay, the Fed has become a blank organization. Okay, so go ahead and just give us your best shot there. Sorry, I had to check on something there. Um, yeah, it's too important. There you go. Let's see. The Fed has become a blank organization. Chris Primer, criminal right off the bat. There you go. James Richter, political. Let's see. Mr. Nguyen, criminal. All right, you guys, too kind. I know you probably have other words in mind there besides criminal. Uh, Inspector Jason, communist, criminal, exposed, criminal. You guys didn't watch that interview with Rob Kientz, did you? He just went off the top of your mind. Pablo Pina, no, it has not become a sumo organization. Maybe one day it will. Would love to see Paul and Yellen go at it in their sumo attire, wouldn't you? All right, so let's see who else is out there. What other comments are out there? Mitch Alex, criminal, joke, criminal. The Fed has become a blank organization. Again, this is from the Rob Kientz interview. That's where you're going to find the answer. Rogue, globalist, rogue, fraudulent, government. Okay, tell you what, that's it. The actual word is whoops. Why am I making a half face at you guys? Okay, the actual word is politicized. And so what we're gonna do is I think there's actually only two guys that got it. James Richter said political. He nailed it. Seymour Rivers government. Um, fairly close. Fairly close. So we'll go ahead and we'll take that as well. So James Richter, political. Seymour Rivers, government, which is pretty close to political or politicized. Excuse me. So those will be our two winners. Appreciate you guys taking the time to give it a go. Your answers is pretty amazing. A lot of you guys said criminal. I see fruitcake. A lot of a lot of answers there. Fraudulent. Excuse me. Excuse me. Oh. All right. So let's revisit our guest Rob Kientz, and he is going to give you the answer there. Excuse me, guys.
I think, it's become a politicized organization. It has been for a long time, regardless of what people say, meaning that they're always aware of the political consequences and the economic consequences of what they do. I think politically, they're trying to hold court because I do think that even though they speak of inflation as transitory, I don't think internally they put it in that bucket. I think they know the longer term effects. But I think that they're hamstrung by policy because at this point, what are they going to do? Their only option, if we have any sort of financial crisis, is to go to negative interest rates. That's not that's not something they want to publicly speak about. So they have to couch everything in terms of everything's okay, everything is status quo. We expected this inflation. We're not going to change anything. It's almost like no matter what they change, they're screwed.
All right, so that was past guest, and just to clarify, James Richter and Seymour Rivers, congrats. We have your emails from prior wins, so good on you. Congratulations. So that was Rob Kientz from last week's interview, and the Fed is supposed to be independent. But what do you think? Is he right in saying the Fed has become politicized? Is the Fed still independent? And just in case some of you may not know, Federal Reserve is not the government. It's a private corporation. It's a private bank, and as a lot of people say, it's no more federal than Federal Express. So, has the Fed become politicized? I mean, we do kind of see, especially now with former Fed head Janet Yellen. She's part of the government, Secretary of the Treasury. They do seem to be moving more and more in lockstep. I mean, if you got two Fed heads, I mean, you gotta expect two Fed heads, meaning Powell and Yellen. I mean, I think you do have to expect that there's going to be a great deal of collaboration between the two of them. So, yeah, what do you think? I'll be looking for your comments, and I will play another clip from Rob Kientz.
So it's going to change some things in the gold market. The LBMA has come out with a paper saying it's going to raise costs and force some of the banks out of the LBMA, where there's only four main banks. So if you take one or two out, how liquid then does that LBMA become? And how does that reverberate around the rest of the gold market? So I think what's possibly going to happen is you're going to see some shifting of trade in the gold market to other financial centers around the world. And I think London's going to lose a little bit of its grip because of this. And I think that's, over time, that's going to become more pronounced.
Okay, so it was pretty interesting what Rob had to say there, and he was referring to the LBMA, and we're going to talk a little bit about them, and of course Basel III. And really the question is, with Basel III, is the LBMA going to lose its grip on the gold market? Is it even possible for that to happen? If other markets or organizations take over, what will it be? Who will it be? Or perhaps even where will it be? And I'll give you one clue after I take a look at the comments here. Um, Peter Schultz, the Fed is the fourth branch of government. Perhaps, perhaps, or maybe they're really the main branch of government and everything else is below them. Who knows? The Fed is the government's credit card. Okay, let me see what else. What else is out there? Um, okay, let's see. A lot of strong opinions that I can tell you folks are really up to speed about the Federal Reserve and about money, knowing what money is. So okay, so looking back at what Rob said, is the LBMA going to lose its grip on the gold market? And especially the last comment here. If other markets or organizations take over, what, who, or where will it be? And I'll give you an insight as to what's going on. Indonesia. Let me scroll down a bit. Indonesia, home to giant gold mine, wants its own bullion bank. So this is what's happening. Okay. Indonesia, home to one of the world's largest gold mines, plans to set up a bullion bank to spur trading of the precious metal domestically. Domestically, the government is consulting with parties, including the central bank and the mining industry, with a plan to start operating the bank in 2024. Trade Minister Mohammed Lutfi said, "Our exports have gone to transit countries because they have better gold trading systems, either in the form of bullion banks or better bourses than ours," Lutfi said in an interview recently. As a gold producing country, why would we sell it to transit countries? Okay, so why would they sell it to transit countries? And that makes a lot of sense. So you can see here where he says, you know, they should be building their own type of bullion bank, really, and possibly look into maybe even being a hub of sorts in Asia as far as gold trading goes. So you can see now there is a shift starting to swell. So we'll see what happens, right? One more clip from Rob Kientz.
Unallocated is we're going to pool your money. We're going to have a certain amount of stock, but you have no ownership of any specific part of that stock. It's unallocated. But as long as everybody doesn't redeem at the same time, think about a bank. A bank is like an unallocated account. You put your money in the bank, they lend most of it, and 9/10 of it, fractional reserve banking. And as long as everybody doesn't withdraw their deposits at once, you're okay. That's basically unallocated. Then you have allocated, which means there's a certain amount of gold or silver allocated to you, but that in some allocated schemes, um, you may not get the same bar back. So they have, say $1 million and $1 million in inventory. You'll get a bar. It may not be a certain serial number. Segregated is I'm buying silver or gold and it's in my own locker. Either I get a specific serialized bar or it's in a tamper proof bag in a specific locker deposit box, and I get that specific, metal back. And that is the highest level of certainty, but also costs the most. So there are trade offs to which one you have. But the most certainty is going to be the allocated and segregated.
Okay, so that was Rob talking about the different types of gold storage, or the ways of holding gold, whether it's allocated, unallocated, pooled, allocated, segregated, allocated. They all have different meanings, and it's important that you know the meanings. So, knowing how silver bullion and the safe house segregate and allocate gives you the ownership of identifiable gold and silver. And true, you may save more by having unallocated, but being in the industry and being very particular about owning specific bars and coins, I personally would not take the unallocated route. And to share a quick story, we do know of a guy. He was storing his gold in a different country, allocated, and he had, I believe it was 2012 gold maple coins. And what happened was he wanted to transfer it into us, move it from one country to us over in Singapore. And when we got the coins, they were a different date. They weren't 2012. I think they were like 2016 or 18 or something like that. So in other words, if this gentleman had bought these coins back in 2012 and stored them, and we get them and they're a different date, 2018 or so, whatever it was, that kind of tells you that the people he was storing it with, they didn't have it. And whatever happened, we don't know. We can surely speculate what happened, but when we got his coins, they were not the same coins that he had bought. So again, you always need to be careful, know the terms, segregated, allocated, unallocated, pooled, allocated, things like that. It's important to always know the terms. So that was Rob Kientz. I do hope you folks take some time to go back and take a look at his interview. He is all over Twitter. He's all over his own channel, goldsilverpros.com. So again, we appreciate Rob spending time with us. Let me take a look at a few of the comments here. Um, okay, yeah, let's see. Truth Monster, yes, will silver be 26 or 26 today? Silver having a rough time, especially at that 28 level. That's for sure. So I guess having said that, maybe we'll go ahead and we'll go over to our website and we'll take a look at the silver price, see exactly what it is. Um, we are having a 75% off transfer in charge right now. So if you're thinking or you have questions about shifting over to Singapore, let us know and we can help you out that. Or maybe you're even with another bullion dealer right now and for whatever reason you're not happy with them, give us a call. We have a discount right now. US dollar. Oh, well, we're not at it's not 26, it's gone down. Silver 25.98 currently in USD. It's down a bit again. Maybe time to buy some more. Gold 1778 still hovering around that important 1750 level. Nickel is doing well, 18,443, 18,443 per ton. Nickel, again, if you don't know, it's a key component in electric vehicle batteries, and it is getting more and more in demand. So take a look at nickel. It's not financial advice or anything. It's just an opinion. Take a look at nickel. Moving down, our investor kit. It is free. Just go ahead and click on it. And yes, absolutely sign up for a storage account. It is free. There are no maintenance fees. Gold silver ratio, right now we're at about 68.5. 68.5. Still right around that 70 level. Amazing. Featured products, some of the things we do offer, of course, the 1,000 ounce LBMA bars, 100-gram gold bars, and again, 1 ounce gold coins. Quite a bit of a variety of things, including nickel. So if you are, hearing more and more news about electric vehicles, you definitely, again, want to take a look at nickel. And of course, 1 kilogram gold bars, 1 kilogram gold bars. But taking a look again at LBMA, I always like to see where we are. Okay, we've restocked. Last week, I think we were down at the 180 level or so. So now we're back up to 322. So well stocked with 1,000 ounce LBMA bars. There's one in the shop. You can go ahead and pick it up. Or we do have 322. You can go ahead and store it in the vault and you will own it. This is yours. So again, as always, to do that though, you do have to sign up as a silver bullion user. That's key. You simply just sign up here and just go ahead and choose an account that you like: personal, joint, trust, joint with a minor, business account, and retirement account. Again, this is also good to look into your precious metals IRAs. I mean, as fiat goes down, you want to be having something that will store the value of your fiat. And just choose your account, go ahead and click on it. Just basic information such as a personal or joint account. It's really just your IDs and filling out the application. And preferred currency, this is also important. And then just basic information. References, as always, please do go ahead and put Silver Bullion Television. This helps us out a lot. And I would suggest you want to receive customer notifications via encrypted secure notification. What that means is when you get an email from us, it'll just say notification from Silver Bullion. There'll be nothing in the body of that email. So that way, Google, Yahoo, Hotmail, all those guys, they can't see what our communication is about, because algos, they're getting pretty smart nowadays. So that's pretty much some of the things that we do. And of course, P2P or peer-to-peer, this is always something that a lot of people find useful, where you can borrow against your metals when you need it, or lend fiat currency in a safe manner. So Silver Bullion, we do match borrowers using their metal as collateral with lenders. Okay, it's not us who's lending the money. It's a peer-to-peer type of a deal. There are people willing to lend, and there are people who need to borrow, and you will use your gold and silver as collateral, but you still own it. It's still yours. Okay. And owners of metal cannot lend their assets. They can only borrow against it. So this is not a leasing program. That's important to know. It's not a leasing program. You still retain full ownership. If you got more questions, you'd like to know more about it, email us at sales@silverbullion.com.sg. Moving over to Twitter. Didn't really find a whole lot of interesting stuff this week in Twitter. But, a few kind of comical things. Shiny Silver 8 by exchanging paper labor notes for real money. That is at least 3 times undervalued. You are effectively tripling your salary without even asking for a raise. So I stack, therefore I am. I know you're stacking, so therefore you are. This one here, James Anderson. It's pretty interesting. He This is just a quick take on money. So let me come back to the beginning here, and we'll go ahead and play it.
There's 3 reasons your life feels like a hamster wheel: debt, income tax, and inflation. Did I say 3? I meant 1. Banks. Back in antiquity, people used gold as money, and they kept it with the gold bank.
I owe you 100 gold coins.
Then one day the bank got greedy.
See, he prints more IOUs without any more gold, loans them out for interest, makes a pretty penny, and nobody is the wiser. Unless everybody wanted their gold back at the same time.
The banker's greatest fear is panic.
I want my gold back now!
Because panic leads to bank runs, and bank runs are game over. From panic after panic at the turn of the century, bankers realized if only there was a super bank that could bail them out whenever they were in danger.
We're running a little low on money.
No problem. How much you need?
And if only they could get the peasants to pay for it. So in 1910, 7 bankers with a quarter of the world's riches, all disguised as Elmer Fudd, met on a secret island and plotted how they would dupe the public and the government into this. 3 years later, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Banks to Slush Fund Act of 1913. I mean the Federal Reserve Act. And now that Uncle Sam had a shiny new credit card, guess who was stuck making payments? Wilson regretted it.
I've ruined my country. A great nation is controlled by its system of credit.
With the super bank, there can't be a bank run. They will always just print more.
We will do whatever we need to do to make sure that there's enough cash in the banking system. And there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve, an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve, an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve.
The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from.
The only way to expose the Ponzi scheme is to target something they can't print. Something they Ponzi even more than money. Something they've worked so hard to kill that it's become the most screaming bargain on earth. So whether you want to stick it to the man,
silver is the Achilles heel, it's the soft underbelly, it is the kill shot.
or protect yourself from his recklessness.
Stocks are so overvalued. The one thing that can hurt that is inflation. I'd have as many inflation hedges on as I possibly could. Maybe we should own commodities at this stage of the game.
This is the way.
All right, so that makes some sense there. Let's see what else is out there. Bloomberg, M1 and M2 are leading indicators to watch in money supply. This is a pretty good one because it does explain the difference between M1 and M2. It's just a short clip, so maybe we'll go ahead and we'll play this one as well. Okay.
Something that we have to pay close attention to going forward, since the Fed seems intent on working with interest rates, namely trying to put them up higher, is what is M1 and M2. M1 is a narrow money supply. It includes money and coins and notes that are in circulation and other money equivalents that can be easily converted to cash, whereas M2 includes everything in M1, but it includes short-term deposits in banks, not CDs you'd have to break, and certain money market funds that can easily be liquidated. What's the importance of the two? Well, I think one of the things the Fed is looking for is the velocity that money can move through the economy. As you look at M1, that's already being circulated. You can measure how it's being circulated. But if you're going to bring new money in, you want to know how fast it can impact things, and that is why you look at the M2.
Okay, yeah, I know it's for some of us it cleared things up. For some of us it just made things a little bit more murky. Fed speak is something that it's difficult to understand them sometimes. Completely get it. World Gold Council, through financial turmoil, economic growth, and everything in between, gold's uniquely versatile investment proposition could make it the strategic advantage you need. Diversification, liquidity, and returns. Explore how gold could enhance your portfolio. I took a look at this. I think it's nothing we all already know, but interesting that it's coming from the World Gold Council, so that's a good thing. Let me see this here. Gold silver ratio. This was also interesting as well. Let me go ahead and play this clip. Let me set it back here. Okay, gold silver ratio.
The gold-silver ratio, which represents the number of ounces of silver it takes to equal the value of 1 ounce of gold, is one of the oldest tracked relationships in the history of finance, going all the way back to the Roman Empire, setting the ratio at 12 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. By 1939, the ratio had moved to 98 to 1. For the whole of the 20th century, the average gold-silver ratio was 47 to 1. However, in the 21st century, the ratio had moved up to a range of around 50 to 1 up to 70 to 1, the lowest level being 40 to 1 in 2011. In 2018, the ratio broke out, reaching a high of almost 105 to 1 by 2020, which brings us to today, with the gold-silver ratio having opened the year around 70 to 1, currently sitting around 68 to 1. The question now becomes, are we establishing a new, higher range, or is the ratio slowly moving back to the lower end of the 21st century's range?
Okay, so that was a look at Twitter. That gold silver ratio bit kind of interesting. Do you think there is a new gold silver ratio that is set that is going to be above 20? I mean, 16, 20. What do you think? Is there going to be a new gold silver ratio set, or are we going to eventually come back to that same 16 to 1 ratio? Some guys even look at a 1 to 1 ratio. It's curious to see what your opinions on this might be. We take a look at the comments. Tweety Bird, absolutely be your own bank, buy precious metals. Absolutely, absolutely. Great comment there. So, what do you think about the ratio? Some guys say 1 to 1. Will it get back to 16 to 1? I think last crisis we were at about 30 to 1. Um, Curious to know. What do you guys think? What do you think it'll be? Okay, so comments here. Okay, yeah, be your own bank. I see a few of you have said that. Definitely be your own bank. Don't do what the bankers say. Do what the bankers do. Joey from Seattle. That fractional reserve banking. Yes, it's absolutely broken already at this point, for sure. Okay, so let's see. Moving on. We'll move on to our topic of the day, and this one, it can be a bit confusing. It can be pretty straightforward. So what I'll try to do is we'll try to go right down the middle and reinforce what you already know about it, or perhaps help you to understand maybe what you don't know about it. So we'll go ahead and we'll try and do that. Talking about Basel III, which is supposed to be taking effect. It is on a lot of people's minds, and we're going to take a look at a few points regarding Basel III. Namely, why do we need it? And how does it affect banks and the gold market? And so to do that, we're going to have to take a look at the history of how this all came about. So during the Great Recession, a handful of major banking institutions put national economies at risk to avoid economic collapse. Governments stepped in, which cost taxpayers dearly. To prevent a reoccurrence, Basel III was developed to force banks to manage their risks more prudently. And Basel III is an international keyword, voluntary. Voluntary. Basel III is an international voluntary regulatory framework designed to strengthen bank capital. So the Great Recession was caused by over speculation in real estate, loose lending standards, and the eventual downturn in the U.S. real estate market. And as a result, confidence in subprime loans and the investment banks that held them eroded. And money market funds and the repurchase agreements, repos, okay? I know a lot of us are hearing this word more and more, repos or reverse repos. So money market funds and the repurchase agreements or repos used as funding degenerated and led to panic in the shadow banking system. Shadow banking system, keyword again. So in the U.S., shadow banking developed when traditional banking became unprofitable. Okay, so you're a bank, you're unprofitable, turn into a shadow bank. That's how it works, right? So banking became unprofitable in the 80s due to disintermediation. Now, money market mutual funds replaced demand deposits, and junk bonds reduced corporate lending. Keeping loans on the balance sheet became unprofitable, which led to securitization and a transfer of credit risk. However, the financial crisis exposed flaws in securitization. So first thing we got to do right now is let's go back and see shadow banking. What is shadow banking? I mean, some of us think it's some type of conspiracy thing, but the truth of the matter, this is real. Okay, so what is shadow banking?
Economist Paul McCulley used the phrase shadow banking system to define financial institutions that do not take deposits in the traditional sense. The types of entities that make up the shadow banking system include hedge funds, special purpose entities, structured investment vehicles, and mutual funds. While these shadow banks do accept funds and also borrow money, they do so in a way that does not subject them to government banking regulations. Shadow banks make most of their money by acting as intermediaries between large borrowers and large lenders. They earn their revenue from interest rate spreads and the fees they charge for their services. It may sound simple, but in fact it is a very complicated system involving complex investments such as derivatives, asset-backed securities, repurchase agreements, credit default swaps, and other structured securities. The shadow banking system has come under increased scrutiny since the financial meltdown of 2008. Since these entities do not take deposits like commercial banks, they are not subject to the same type of regulations, such as capital requirements. This permits the shadow banking system to take on more risk. Many point to this as a significant cause of the financial meltdown. Both in the U.S. and worldwide, the shadow banking system is significant. Some estimates claim it comprises 25 to 30% of the global financial system.
Okay, so it began with Bear Stearns. Clearing Bank refused to provide intraday credit, which Bear needed to pay its outstanding repos. Again, I mean, this is key, guys. A lot of this started in the repo market, and if you've been watching the reverse repo market, it's exploding. I think at last it was something like 800 plus trillion, 800 plus trillion on a daily basis. So keep an eye on it. But as a result, clearing banks withdrew to protect their assets, leading to a collapse in repo and asset-backed commercial paper prices. The final straw was the meltdown in repos that began at Lehman Brothers' UK subsidiary, which left clients without collateral. The resulting fire sale created mark-to-market losses, margin calls, and further liquidations. And the breaking of the buck by the Reserve Primary Fund triggered a run on the shadow banking system that required unprecedented support by the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. Financial institutions that make up the shadow banking system include finance companies, investment banks, and the largest U.S. investment banks had to merge with commercial banks after the crisis. Money market funds and hedge funds, private equity, and venture capital firms could fall into this category if the funds they manage are highly leveraged. So, property and casualty insurers generally do not operate in shadow banking. However, we all know what happened with AIG, in which it demonstrated that, yes, they can become involved. Insuring against defaults and credit events theoretically reduced risk on debt, but instead obscured the risk in the system that created it. So, therefore, increased regulation may increase costs and thus reduce lending. However, the crisis began as a consequence of too much leverage. So, trimming back may be an effective way of creating long term stable growth. Fractional reserve banking is unstable by nature, and competition entices risky behavior. Because of the importance to the economy, banks need to be regulated. The shadow banking system is equally vital to the economy and is, in fact, banking. Initiating regulation on shadow banks should make the financial system more resilient. I mean, it's for me, it's kind of amazing because you got these guys who are trying to do things to become unregulated, and then now they're kind of being helped along. I mean, that's just the way I see it. I could be wrong, but anyway, basically, more transparency is needed, less risk required. So, can Basel III really do anything to tame banks gone wild? I mean, banks are notorious in skirting laws, rules, regulations, and I mean, let's be frank, politicians, they allow it, right? I mean, look, just the word shadow bank, I mean, that should kind of make you cringe a little bit, right? Shadow bank. And this guy would know. He would definitely know all about it. This is Jamie Dimon. And this article, I want you to notice, though, it's back in 2012, January 13th, 2012. So Jamie Dimon confirms worst fears about Basel III. Okay, so this was already in people's minds back then, where the International Bank capital regulations known as Basel III may be weakening the financial system by promoting herd like behavior by the banks. What a twist, right? The new capital requirements require dramatically higher levels of capital, which is intended to make individual banks less likely to fail. But because the regulations treat certain assets as less risky than others, they encourage banks to load up on the same types of assets. This effect of the capital adequacy rules was confirmed by Jamie Dimon. Again, this is back in 2013 or 2012. The CEO and chairman of JP Morgan Chase during the fourth quarter. Okay, never mind this part. The Diamond said the bank was concentrating on increasing its exposure to assets that have advantageous risk weighting, while limiting exposure to assets that have disadvantageous risk weighting. So what's more, he said that banks all around the world are doing the same thing. And this isn't a problem if the regulators have correctly assessed the risk of various types of loans, but regulators have a terrible record of making these assessments. In the decade or so before the financial crisis struck, regulators gave privileged status to mortgage backed securities. And this is why Jamie Dimon was saying that herd type of thinking moved in where everybody jumped in on mortgage backed securities. So as a result, the banking systems in the US and Europe were badly overexposed to the US housing market. Okay, so the new capital, it's pretty interesting that Jamie Dimon had said something like this back then. But the new capital requirements require dramatically higher levels of capital, which is intended to make individual banks less likely to fail. Okay, that's their intent. This is what they're trying to do. But because the regulations treat certain assets as less risky than others, they encourage banks to load up on the same types of assets. Well, now back then, mortgage backed assets were pointed out as where the financial herd moved to. But in the short future ahead, that herd might now have to move or will move into gold, perhaps as Basel III takes more of an effect. So pretty interesting now that herd. If Jamie Dimon is saying there's a type of a herd mentality with the banks, then it's okay to reason that, well, the banks would then be moving into gold, but physical gold. So in an effort to bring more monetary stability, sound banking practices, Basel III in part looks to gold as being an answer. And we hear how this is good for gold. Some say bad for gold. So I wanted to take a look at just that. Is Basel III good or bad for gold? And why the concern? So looking at this article from Market Watch, and I reached my article limit. Uh-oh. So why Basel III regulations are poised to shake up the gold market? Well, they're talking about the 85% ratio. It's okay. I have something else. So we'll continue on. My colleague Vincent, we got to get some subscriptions to these guys. Okay, Basel III, a gift for physical gold investors. This coming from Seeking Alpha. And May 13th, 2021. So fairly recent. So Basel III agreement will come into force on June 28th. It's today, 2021 for European banks, and on January 1st, 2022 for British banks. It includes the net stable funding ratio. This is the key component here, this requirement. It'll make holding unallocated, keyword, unallocated gold problematic. Holding unallocated gold will be problematic. But the NSFR requirement is bullish for allocated gold. So we're starting to see the difference between holding unallocated and if you're going to hold allocated. Okay, so this is really what it's about. So according to the Basel III framework, gold will become a zero risk asset. So I just want to add in, this is allocated gold will become a zero risk asset. So overall, Basel III will be great for, and I'm going to say again, allocated physical gold or gold that you have, gold that I need more of. We all need more of as much as we do with silver. So again, distinguish the difference between unallocated and allocated. So Basel III is a set of international regulations concerning bank capital adequacy, stress testing, and overall market liquidity. Now, many of these regulations have been introduced straight after the 2008 2009 financial crisis, which we showed you earlier. But there are several aspects of these governments that will only come into effect today, pretty much, for European banks and next year for the UK. To sum it up, gold will be a risk free tier one asset. Allocated gold. Okay, let's add in that word. Allocated gold will become a risk free tier one asset, and it will become more expensive to buy and sell unallocated gold. These factors are highly bullish for physical gold, not paper gold, physical gold. So investors in these precious metals will be generously rewarded provided they buy physical gold. Physical gold, and if you're storing, make it allocated or segregated, allocated physical gold. And they go on to explain it in a little bit more detail. So under Basel III, gold would become a tier one asset. Again, allocated gold would become a tier one asset or a zero risk asset for banks. And as mentioned in the framework here, at national discretion, gold bullion held in own vaults. This is kind of puzzling also, though, or on an allocated basis to the extent backed by bullion liabilities can be treated as cash and therefore risk weighted at 0%. Okay, 0% refers to allocated. Okay, can't stress this enough. In addition, cash items in the process of collection can be risk weighted at 20%. So let's move on here. The interesting point is that gold must be in physical and held in the institution's own vault. So let's hope they get some auditors in there, third party auditors. And it should not be in paper form or owned and leased by someone else. Most gold investments are leased or borrowed or held in paper form. So it looks like major changes are about to come. So I mean, we'll still get to more about it, but I know probably all of you have been seeing on YouTube how gold will go to the moon because of Basel III. $100 movements a day, perhaps. Gold 5,000, gold 10,000, gold at 50,000, gold to the moon, and all that good stuff. I mean, hey, I'm all for that as well. So I think we're all on the same page there, so we can just kind of brush over that one. But yes, Basel III and gold are indeed good for a bank's balance sheet. Okay, and Luke Groman will explain why.
There's a Basel III net stable funding ratio, NSFR for short, is apparently it's part of Basel III. It's apparently was scheduled to go live June 28th, 2021 globally. It's apparently going live in the U.S. July 1st. From what I've seen, it's been delayed in the U.K. to January of 2022. My reading of the regulations, and take that with a grain of salt because I'm not a lawyer or a banker with that or a regulator, but my reading of it is it seems to read as if it is desirous of forcing an unwind of the massively levered unallocated paper gold markets because basically it makes it very expensive for bullion banks to hold unallocated gold positions and very cheap to hold allocated physical gold positions. So we'll see if what happens with it. I'm always reticent to say this is it for the gold market because I've been around the gold market now for 12 going on 13 years and I've been through a number of this is it's before, and so it's just I want to be conservative with that outlook. Nearer term, I think I would say two things. Number one, the action in gold prices, where we have seen prices go down even with real yields falling a little bit, and when we saw strong, even with strong global physical gold demand, that over the last several months, I think on some level was indicative of or something you would expect to see if bullion banks were trying to get on sides ahead of an NSFR change. I don't want to ascribe motive, causation. Correlation is not causation, but that's interesting.
Okay, so that was Luke Groman giving his input there, and I'll take a look at something else that Rob Kientz said pertaining to that as well. In fact, I should roll that clip now. Rob Kientz and his take on it.
I think it's an attempt to strengthen the banking system from a liquidity perspective so that we don't have liquidity freeze up and have another Lehman event. Whether it's enough, I don't know. Part of that is affecting the gold market because part of the liquidity ratio is called the net stable funding ratio, the NSFR, which basically says you have to have physically allocated gold and you have to hedge the price risk in some sort of derivative or futures market. And then we will consider it, basically a high quality asset, equivalent to cash, essentially. If you have allocated gold that's hedged in a futures market, it's equal to cash, which is a big thing for gold because it puts it center stage. And that's why the last 10 years you've seen the central banks around the world net accumulating a lot of gold. It's a good thing for the balance sheet.
Okay, so now one might say that in line with Basel III's effort to bring in banking stability is to unwind the bank's balance sheets. And that's kind of what part of this is all about. So if a bank held allocated gold to use that gold to unwind their bank's balance sheet, that gold would then have to rise in price in order for it to help them unwind their balance sheet, hold physical gold, allocated gold. Gold price would have to go up, and then their balance sheet would then be able to unwind. And it's that seems to be in a lot of people's minds as well. The debt, we are crazy in debt. We have to unwind the balance sheets somehow. So this is what something again Basel III is about, which in part it is to help stability, bank stability, and that does mean unwinding your balance sheet. Now, if a bank held that allocated gold, of course, to use that gold, it's going to help to unwind their balance sheet. Gold would have to rise in price. And again, this is in part why some people are calling for those higher gold prices. But knowing Basel III would be implemented could be one of the reasons why banks and governments they have been buying gold at fever pitch. I mean, we know through these last years, central banks have been buying gold. They've been buying it up. Russia's been buying it up. China's been buying it up. Everybody's been buying it up. I hope you have as well. So I want to take a quick look at Basel III and the gold market. Okay, so this is another article coming from the Gold Hub blog. So as Basel III comes into force, we look at the impact of the NSFR, that net stable funding ratio in the gold market. And there has been much debate. Let me make this bigger. I think it may be a bit small. Okay. So there has been much debate about the implications of Basel III on the bullion industry. And what is clear is that under the current rules, the cost to banks of holding gold on the balance sheet will increase. Again, unallocated. Unallocated gold on the balance sheet will increase. And the NSFR requires 85% of required stable funding. Now, this is punitive and doesn't acknowledge the highly liquid nature of gold and the way gold is often transacted as a currency. The World Gold Council and the LBMA, London Bullion Market Association, recently wrote to the Prudential Regulatory Authority, setting out our concerns about the NSFR and the 85% required stable funding, RSF in particular. Notice he used the word our, okay, our concerns. And again, who is our or who are they? We're talking about the World Gold Council and we're talking about the LBMA. So he goes on to name some points here where the current clearing and settlement system would be undermined. Okay, it would be undermined, and the increased costs may make participation in the clearing and settlement regime commercially unviable, potentially leading to some banks I believe he meant exiting, some banks exiting the system. Liquidity could be drained, and the cost of taking on gold deposits as unallocated gold would increase compared to the cost of custody services for allocated gold. Well, there's a reason for that, right? And unallocated gold is an essential source of liquidity for the effective functioning of the clearing and settlement system. Basically, what this gentleman is saying is it's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt the paper gold or the unallocated gold market. Financing costs would increase. Stable funding costs could be passed through to non-bank market participants such as miners, refiners, and manufacturers using gold. and central bank operations would be curbed. The clearing banks facilitate gold deposit lending and swaps operations, essentially sources of market liquidity. So he's saying it's not going to be good in a sense. So let me come down. I believe there's just one more part I want to look at. So there has been much speculation about the impact of the NSFR on the allocated and unallocated gold markets. Some commentators have noted that allocated gold can be considered a tier 1 asset and therefore it receives a risk weighting of 0. Now, this is nothing new. Gold held in own vaults or on an allocated basis has always been a tier 1 asset under Basel Accords. Now, this is because allocated gold attracts no credit risk, banking stability, right? This is what we're trying to do. It is neither the asset or liability of the custodian bullion bank and is therefore not considered part of the custodian bank's balance sheet. Remember, if it's on that balance sheet, you are a creditor. That bank owes you something. Okay, so this is in part of what's going on as well, where unallocated gold goes on a bank's balance sheet. So whilst Basel III does not materially change the treatment of allocated gold, it does increase the cost of holding unallocated gold. But does this mean that unallocated gold market will disappear? No, it won't. It won't. But the cost of holding unallocated gold will go up. So I think that those are the key points there. So as mentioned, a rise in gold price may help to unwind a balance sheet if a bank holds physical allocated gold, as it is considered a tier 1 asset. However, the spotlight is pointing more and more to unallocated gold, the unallocated gold. So unallocated gold, which is what goes on a bank's balance sheet, requires a net stable funding ratio of 85%, as I understand it. It's the unallocated part that is going to see this 85% NSFR. And it's this that will make it more expensive for banks to have unallocated, let's just call it positions, and that will increase a bank's balance sheet, not decrease. So Basel III is to try and make banks more stable. And as a result, they are going to put a price tag now on having unallocated positions, let's say, that go on a bank's balance sheet. And this might be one of the other bigger issues where it could become more expensive for banks to have unallocated positions, right? And cheaper for banks to hold allocated positions. Let's just use that word position. Again, which is why for the bank to unwind, the gold price is going to have to go up. So ultimately, some banks will stay in gold while others are going to move out of gold. It depends if they're allocated or unallocated. And here's an interview from a couple years back with Keith Weiner. He explains it. It's about 3 minutes long or so. So have a look. What does that mean, the difference between a tier 3 and a tier 1?
So tier 1 and tier 3 refer to capital. It's actually the liability side. If you think about everything, to understand a bank, everything is the opposite of how, to the bank, everything's the opposite than it is to the depositor. So if you think of having money in the bank, well, the bank owes you. So from the bank's perspective, that deposit is a liability. So if you're establishing a bank, you can have different kinds of capital. That is how the bank raises its funding in order to do its business. So the regulators love equity capital because there's no obligation to ever repay it back. So if you're the bank, you raise equity capital, the regulators are happy to let you invest your equity capital in anything you well please to do, because there's no risk that in a funding crisis that the bank could be caught up short. So people misunderstand, in the gold community, misunderstand this regulation, and they're thinking, oh, this means that the banks can buy more gold and that the regulators are blessing the purchase of gold. The tier 1 and stuff is referring to how the banks raise their capital, which is their liability. Gold isn't on the liability side. The banks aren't borrowing gold, like selling gold-denominated bonds or anything like that. It's on the asset side of the bank's balance sheet. And there you run into the problem of what's called net stable funding ratio. So to the regulators, and this is true in reality, it's not a regulatory artifact, there's two different kinds of risks that can hit a bank. One risk is funding risk. That is, let's say a bank does the absolute riskiest funding and they borrow in the overnight funding market. What can happen, and what happened in 2008, is those markets dry up. All of those funding sources pull their funding back. But meanwhile, the bank still has a long-term asset. So if you borrow overnight and you buy a 30-year mortgage, you're taking a huge risk that eventually that will happen. And then the regulators worry about, on the asset side, there's default risk, which we just said gold doesn't have. And I think the regulators understand that. But then there's market price volatility risk. So if you borrow $1 million to buy $1 million asset, and the $1 million asset drops and becomes a $900,000 asset, you're insolvent.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, assuming, it takes capital off your balance sheet. If that happens to your other assets, you're in trouble. And so the regulators have increased the risk rating that they put on gold, and say that it needs an 85% net stable funding ratio, which means the funding that the bank gets in order to own that gold asset has to be more secure types of funding, which basically increases the opportunity cost for the bank to own gold or a gold-denominated asset, and therefore it's going to make the banks reluctant to be in the gold business. And I think this is part of, we've seen a number of banks leave the gold market.
Yes.
And the most recent, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, SocGen, right? So one by one, the banks are saying, this is not a great business for us to begin with. It's a marginal little group of 20, 30 people within, an enterprise of 200,000 employees, and, produces marginal profits. And if the regulators make it more expensive and more annoying to do business, they just say, fine, we'll exit the business. And, before that was Scotia Makata. Before that was it BNP or was it Credit Agricole? I forget which one, a couple years ago now. Before that was Deutsche. The banks are pulling out of the business because of this, and that's going to mean higher funding costs for bullion dealers and jewelers and everybody else.
Okay, so as Keith said, some banks may leave the gold market, others will stay. But beyond the price of gold, the required stable funding ratio of 85% to hold unallocated gold, will it stop the paper markets from existing and the price suppression many claim that it brings? That's also a key question. So I want to take you to an article from, I believe this is, there you go, Silver Doctors, why Basel III may not bring the end of gold price suppression. So again, we're looking at gold, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. A lot of people thinking the suppression will end. But here's the flip side, why it may not bring the end of gold price suppression. And this is from Chris Powell and Gata, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. So much hope has been engineered in the monetary metals sector by the Basel III banking regulations being recommended to the world by the BIS. Let me make this a bit larger for you folks in case you're on your phone or something. BIS, okay, since the regulations might make prohibitively expensive or prohibit the business of unallocated or paper gold, the business of creating vast supplies of imaginary gold for price suppression purposes. The regulations are said to be taking effect in Europe at the end of June and likely in the UK, the headquarters of the bullion banking, at the end of the year or beginning of next year. Let's see. The conclusion that the Basel III rules will smash the paper gold system is drawn not just by advocates of liberating the gold market from price suppression, but also by the proprietors of the paper gold business themselves, the LBMA, and the World Gold Council, which the other day issued a panic-stricken public protest, and we'll take a look at that after this. But even if this interpretation of Basel III rules are correct, Basel III might not necessarily stop the gold price suppression by governments and central banks. The LBMA banks create the paper gold for price suppression purposes and provide camouflage for central bank interventions. In exchange, the LBMA banks have been essentially underwritten in their gold dealings by central banks or certain central banks that arrange gold swaps and leases for them. These interventions cannot work as well without such camouflage, for if central banks had to intervene directly and openly to control the gold price and protect their currencies, intervention would be visible and more easily defeated by the market. That openness is what helped collapse the London gold pool in March of 1968. If you're not familiar with the London gold pool, I suggest you go ahead and search it up and find out what it is. It's pretty interesting. And this is why the secret March 1999 staff report of the International Monetary Fund warned against requiring central banks to disclose their gold swaps and leases. Disclosure would expose their interventions, and their interventions would not work very long if they couldn't deceive the markets. Interesting words. If they could not deceive the markets. But central banks probably could find mechanisms other than the LBMA for creating paper, gold, and imaginary supply. Indeed, even in the era of gold standard, governments didn't back their currencies with gold at a 100% ratio, and they managed with gold coverage of well less than 50%, trusting that responsible monetary and fiscal policy would suppress demand. And they were right. That is, the gold standard itself was a fractional reserve gold banking system, though its coverage level was far higher than it is in today's gold banking system, where there may be as many as 90 or 100 claims to every ounce of gold. So central banks hoping to continue gold price suppression might exempt their banks. Okay, might exempt their banks. Remember, this is voluntary. Okay, Basel III is voluntary. So central banks hoping to continue gold price suppression might exempt their banks or certain of their banks from the Basel III rules on gold. These exemptions might be kept secret, and such banks might get secret government guarantees. With such guarantees, these banks might function perfectly well while providing camouflage for its interventions. Last paragraph here. Now, of course, this would be fraud, but the whole system is already fraud. As early as 1961, the Federal Reserve officials were secretly proposing falsifying U.S. government records to facilitate manipulation of the gold market. Okay, so there you go. Gata, who knows this topic inside and out. Okay, they know this inside and out. Chris Powell, Bill Murphy. They're saying that the paper markets may indeed still function as they always did. And in line with that, we see the World Gold Council and LBMA already making noise on the importance of the paper or unallocated markets. And again, important, this whole Basel III, it's voluntary. Okay, just keep that in mind. It's voluntary. But here's the LBMA and World Gold Council, what they put out. And I'll just read the executive summary portion. Let me just make this a bit larger here. So current legislation prescribes the punitive liquidity treatment for gold and other precious metals. This is reflected in provision setting out the application of the liquidity coverage ratio, or LCR, and the application of the net stable funding ratio. So try not to confuse everyone with all of these words and abbreviations, that acronyms that they're using. But it came about because 2007, 2008 global financial crisis. But however, we consider, so again, who is we? The we is the World Gold Council and the LBMA. Okay, we consider that current proposals under the NSFR fail to take into account the damaging effect that the rules will have on the precious metals clearing and settlement system, potentially undermining the system completely, and on the increased cost of financing precious metals production. So in addition, the proposal fails to take into account the quantitative evidence, which suggests that in a liquidity crisis, gold acts as an extremely liquid asset. Okay, so it is therefore important for the precious metals markets that the Prudential Regulation Authority, PRA, can resolve the unintended consequences of stemming from the application of the NSFR. So let's just get through it quick here. Clearing and settlement, the PRA should assess whether it would be justified to exempt precious metals held by members of the London Precious Metals Clearing Limited. Okay, so not us. We shouldn't be included. You need to exempt us in the provision of clearing services from being subjected to the NSFR. So yes, they're saying not us. LPMCL provides the clearing and settlement services of precious metals such as gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Okay, so we'll just move on here. Gold is a currency. PRA should note that when gold is deposited and lent, it is treated as a currency by market participants. When functioning as a currency, gold has no cash funding requirement. When used as the underlying asset in financing transactions, an appropriate regulatory treatment would mean that gold loans backed by the equivalent deposits from central banks and financial institutions would negatively be impacted by the NSFR. And the HQLA, high quality liquid asset, should be reviewed. Should review gold's position as a high quality liquid asset. The LBMA and WGC and the members of the market, they each believe that gold, or should they believe, sorry about that gold should be reclassified as an extremely HQLA. Now, this position is justified by the trade data that members have been reporting to LBMA since 2018. Okay, so basically, I'll end it there. It's just a whole bunch of, no, not us. Look, you're going to wreck the system. You don't understand the system and yada, yada, yada. So alrighty then, make no mistake, the battle's brewing. A battle is brewing, and the World Gold Council and the LBMA are on the same side where the NSFR may hurt the market with unintended consequences. Now, make no mistake, though, the London over-the-counter market is the world's largest financial market for gold. So, there is one bit of one plea in there, I guess, because of the importance of that over-the-counter market. But again, this is the difference between allocated and unallocated gold. This is the difference between physical and paper gold. So again, unallocated gold is an essential source of market liquidity, as mentioned earlier. The clearing and settlement regime depends on it. And without an unallocated gold market, it would be very difficult to finance and facilitate the upstream activities of gold producers, refiners, and the downstream users of gold, such as jewelers and fabricators. And it's the key statement. The real economy demand for gold relies on the unallocated gold market. Now, how do you folks feel about that statement? The real economy demand for gold relies on the unallocated gold market. So curious to know what you folks think about that. And I'm watching the comments. See, you guys got a lot of good comments going on there. As mentioned, though, there is a battle brewing. But there's one other thing tied into Basel III that we might not see that, perhaps not many people are talking about. And this is coming from Andrew McGuire, who knows the gold market very well. And this was in an interview with Rob Kientz from Gold Silver Pros. And I want you to listen to what Andrew McGuire has to say.
Look, we've just experienced a 50-year war on gold. I mean, look, and we know the COMEX was formed 2 years after Nixon removed the gold dollar peg. I mean, so really what we all know what was happening. Other central banks were saying, I'll take that gold. Thank you very much. I'll swap these dollars and we'll take the gold. And, you're financing wars. You're spending too much money. Yeah, of course, we'll take it. So he shut it down, as we know. So the COMEX was instigated, as we know, to create volatility, to create unlimited supplies of paper gold to control the price. Well, I think we've come full circle now. And I think what's happened is it's bit back. And I think what's happened is that because we've had essentially all the other competing global banks, central banks are now moving back to saying, look, I can see this dollar price. Thank you. There it is. That's pretty cheap, actually, compared to where we really think it's valued. So yeah, okay, it's not $35, it's not $45 as it was. No, but hey, $1,900, that's cheap when we think about the big global war. And I think it actually, wars don't get fought in nuclear form, thank goodness, but they get fought in the financial markets. And I think this is an attack on US dollar hegemony. It's coming. I think the Bank of International Settlements is actually bringing these rules in, these regulations in, to really kind of stop this attack on the US dollar. And look, we know that the United States relies on the dollar's special status, exorbitant privilege, right? And obviously we're looking to fund massive public and private borrowing. And with the Fed completely boxed in, I think there's no argument. They've got to pursue this mandate. Look, we now see the US on the back foot without moving themselves to allow an upside sanctioned US dollar price revaluation. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons for that, but I think the BIS are actually facilitating this action. But, to give a timeline on this, it's difficult to give a timeline, but given the recent moves by China and Russia to diversify US dollar holdings into physical gold, I think it's going to be about, my view, from a wholesale market perspective, talking to all the liquidity providers around the desk that we deal with, they're figuring, hey, look, it's got to be 3 to 6 months to see a real physical price emerge, and it will happen in stair steps.
Okay, so now we have another thing to consider. Is this also about the US dollar? Is it also about the dollar? It very well could be. If it has to do with banks, it has to do with currency, it has to do with what they define as money. It has to do with the world's reserve currency. These things are all interlinked, right? You can't separate them. And it has to do with the US dollar and the world's US dollar denominated debt. So these things definitely all do tie in with one another. Make no mistake. So if you dig deeper than the gold story, Basel III does in some ways address the recklessness of banks and the US dollar to which the world's banks and the world's trade operate with. So I know, this is now, I thought I understood Basel III, this and that, and now you've thrown something else into the mix. But the other thing, comics, so what about comics? I mean, after all, this is where so much of the beatdowns take place, right? I mean, I think we're all pretty familiar with that. So let's be real. This is where a lot of it happens, and this is a hard one to answer. Will Basel III affect comics? It's a hard one to answer, and it was a question that I put forth to our recent guest again, Rob Kientz, which is why I suggest that you folks go back and take a look at our video or interview with him. But this is what he had to say about comics.
Comics is a little bit different animal because it's not an over-the-counter market. It's a futures market in which you have registered trades, and the registered trades don't have to be backed by physical, meaning the market, the longs can stand for delivery. They have the right to stand for delivery, but there's also provisions in those contracts that the exchange can say, well, we can force you into cash. So will Basel force the COMEX to change its ways and become a physical delivery market primarily? I don't think so, but it'll be interesting it'll more be interesting for me to see how the bullion banks who supply a lot of this gold treat their balance sheet as a result. And I don't think anybody knows. I've been asking around this question, and that's a little bit more complex of an argument to pull apart. And I don't think we know what's going to happen on the COMEX. I suspect that there, over the next 6 months, is going to be a rush to higher physical deliveries to get the physical out because of the uncertainty. But in terms of how it affects the participating banks at this point, I honestly, I can't find anybody that's formulated, a solid thesis on that.
Okay, so that'll pretty much end the topic of the day. Maybe I put forth more questions and answered questions, but I think in general, we all understand what Basel III is. It's really the difference between holding allocated and unallocated gold, where that 85% ratio is going to be applied to unallocated gold, which may drive some banks out of the gold business, which may cause some banks to get more gold. Because if that gold price should go up, that will unwind the balance sheet or their balance sheet. And ultimately, this is what it's all about as well. Bank stability, you want to be stable, you got to clear your debt. What's one way to clear it? Have some gold, raise the price of gold. So interesting times ahead. That is for sure. And we'll be moving over to our comment section. But first, I want to take a look at what you all have been saying. I can see the bug is on your mind. Um, I can see quite a few things. Um, yeah, I see where it is. Um, yeah, I know. I've been watching a lot of the things that you folks are talking about, but it can go so many ways right now. So hang on, just let me take a look right here. Uh, Bloodbath McGrath, dollar will strengthen. Okay. We ask a lot of people this, and they seem to be kind of split. Some guys say the dollar is going to go down. Some guys say it's going to go up. So, if you ever watched our Metal Money segments, you'll see that a lot of these guys are saying, you know, they're kind of split. It can go either up or down. Um, let's see. Yes, you can actually buying gold and owning gold in a jurisdiction like Singapore is could be an option for a lot of people. It may not be an option for some, but it's definitely an option for a lot of people. And there's a lot of good reasons why. So it's actually a great comment there. Um, let's see. Okay, so yeah, Manuel de Jesus for sure. Interesting times ahead. Okay, so I'll just head on to the commentary part here. Basel III was meant to strengthen the balance sheets of banks. While it is positive that gold is more in the limelight in the banking world, there are caveats to it. And because of that, I'm going to say, I will say, don't count on Basel III to send gold prices to the moon anytime soon, or at least not yet anyway. So I will go on the record and say that. If I'm wrong, I'm going to be happy. If I'm right, well, and it's kind of what I expected here. In the end, the question of is Basel III good or bad for gold? Basel III on a very basic basic level, simply creates a dividing line between physical gold and paper gold, allocated gold and unallocated gold. Okay, that's kind of where we're at once you really, really break it down. So the good and the bad of it really depends on how you value gold and why you buy gold. It all really depends on that. Some of us, we're physical only. You have to have physical gold, no paper markets, no ETFs, no unallocated, none of that. Other people, they they have the means to buy gold, they have the means to store it somewhere, and they're fine buying unallocated. Unallocated, more than likely, it'll mean less to store the gold. And then if some may not even want to take the gold, but they'll just have exposure to the gold price. So they're perfectly fine with unallocated. So as much as some of us may hate it, there are reasons for it. Okay, there are reasons for it. And again, some of us definitely die hard physical physical gold people. So it just really depends on which side of the fence that you're on. So that'll wrap up the commentary section. Let me go and take a look at more of the comments from you guys. Let's see. Mm, let me see here. Uh, Good one. Justin Strange, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope I can answer your question here. With comics being unallocated, could it drop as banks dump their comics holdings? Oh, gee. That's a great question. Um, I it does look like there are going to be less banks that will be involved. That much looks for certain. As to comics, can they continue the game? Absolutely. They could continue it. I just it's a tough question to answer. Maybe my colleague Vincent might want to take a stab at that one. Let me put that back up there. Appreciate the super chat. That is a tough question. With comics being unallocated, could it drop as banks dump their comics holdings? The thing with comics, though, they do claim to be allocated, right? I mean, for the most part, as far as what I know, they tell you that it's backed by physical gold, physical silver. So that is that's really a great question. I can't, I have a hard time with this one to be honest with you. Um, so again, my colleague Vincent, if you want to take a stab at that one, go for it. That's a tough one. That is a tough one. Sorry, I couldn't help you out with that. Um, Good question. Good question. See what else is out there. Okay, yeah, dollar milkshake theory. Brent Johnson. Yeah, he believes dollar's going to go up still. Could be right. You know, could be right. All the debt is in dollars. That's for sure. I'm still thinking about your question. You know, that's a tough one. That's really a tough question. Um, okay, let me see what else is out here. I feel like giving you a refund. Can't answer your question. Okay, so yeah, I'm looking at it here. Okay, colleague Vincent chimed in. Banks will adjust their unallocated gold holdings in the short term. I would agree with that for sure. They need to find assets to cover the amount of unallocated gold they own. That's true as well. And that's pretty much what this has been about, where, they are going to adjust. And if they are holding unallocated, they're going to have to find more assets to cover it because of that 85% NSFR. So, yeah, Vincent, thanks for chiming in. And that was pretty much what this was about. I hope that answers your question, Justin. Vincent, thanks. I'm pretty stumped with that one. Really, I'm just thinking of comics and all the shenanigans that goes on there, and I can't really get past that. So, thanks for chiming in. Couple more comments, and then we'll head out here. Let's see. Carrie Ellen Wilder, absolutely nothing beats reality. Hold physical precious metals in your own possession. Be your own central banker. Completely agree. Um, have some in your possession, without question. And then again, for others who are capable, they may choose to, for whatever reasons, hold their physical outside of their own jurisdictions, because there are benefits to that as well. Make no mistake there. So one more, and I'll end it up here. Uh, let's see, Vincent again. He chimed in. In the long term, banks will gradually get used to allocated gold as tier one assets, and we could see that they will hold more gold. And it is interesting because I think the allocated gold has been a tier one for quite a while. And the change is really coming from the unallocated gold side. So, banks are going to have to adjust. Will they adjust, or will they exit the gold market? We'll see what happens there. We will see what happens. So, having said all that, I'll be Justin Strange. Yes, it's the unknown. It is the unknown, my man. That was a great question. Appreciate it. And having said all that, we'll end with Justin Strange, who asked that strange and hard and difficult question. We appreciate that. But we'll end it there. And as I always say, do your best to be a blessing, not a burden. Again, we all see what's coming down the road. We are going to have to help each other. Even that neighbor over the fence that you might not like, you're going to have to help him out as well. So be a blessing, not a burden. And as I always say, saddle up for what's coming ahead and silver up as well. I'll see you guys next week, and take care of each other. All right. Take care.